Welcome. My name is Philip Bither. I'm Senior Curator for Performing Arts here at the Walker Art Center. And it's my great pleasure to have with me this morning Bill T. Jones, who has one of the leading forces in the contemporary performing art world in dance, but also a long-time friend and an artist who we've believed in now and supported for more than 30 years here at the Walker Art Center. Multiple commissions, residencies, lots of fantastic engagements and works that Bill has brought to us. Today, Bill T. Jones and his company are here actually for the last week developing a new work called Storytime. So I'd like to begin, Bill, with welcome, by the way.
It's great to be here, Philip. Great, great.
You've said in the past that each new work begins with a question. What was the question that you confronted when you began to think about making a piece called Storytime?
I think a basic way to think about it was Bill T. Jones, the performer, was saying, what about me? I had retired from dancing 5 years ago. I say I only dance when I'm happy, which means I dance in my living room, I dance for friends or when I feel it. But then I had this desire that I wanted to get back on stage and do something that I felt my knees and my ankles and my back would allow me to do, and not have to go through the ritual every day of being in a dance company. So storytelling, very important to me. Storytelling, singing, and what have you. And I thought that that's what I would do. I would make a program of just telling stories that would come to places that I feel comfortable in, like the Walker, like this room, actually, I was thinking of, maybe even more than the McGuire, and other places around. And then something happens. There is this hungry child, which is called the dance company. And the child has an appetite always. What's new? What's new, Daddy? And it's very difficult for me when I'm talking to presenters and I don't know what's happening, for me to bifurcate and say, oh, I'm doing this with the company, and I'm going to be, by the way, I'm doing this little thing over here for myself, because they all want to know, oh, you're going to be doing something again.
Right.
For whatever reasons, the ideas were pushed together.
So originally you gave some thought about it being a solo work, just you on stage.
And I would even like downplaying that it was going to be about movement at all, just stories. And of course, I've been a fan of John Cage's reading for a long, long time, and listening to it and hearing him tell
particularly his work Indeterminacy.
Well, and Indeterminacy was one thing, because, of course, a whole series of things, Morris Graves and What You Say and all of these things are all wonderful. Storytime was a little bit more, Indeterminacy was a little bit more esoteric, but when I looked at it, I thought, well, maybe that's exactly what you need. If you're going to do something which is spontaneous and tell stories, maybe it needs a strong form. And then once I start thinking about form, then I'm thinking about whose form. And then I think, oh, Cage has given me a maximum freedom, but a very, very difficult problem, which is they have to be exactly 1 minute long. And then it becomes this whole question of what do I want to report? And using him now as my unofficial mentor. So I oftentimes in the middle of a rehearsal will say, what would John Cage think about this? Now, my companion and creative director, Bjorn Ameland, or my associate director, Janet Wong, would say, look, Bill, you're not John Cage. And this is where we're at now here at the Walker Residency. What about the strictures placed on it, this 1 minute? Yes, we're keeping that. What about something being unbroken story, one after another, in the way that he did it? Well, we're making a type of theater, and I'm not making a Cunningham work. What about my own sense of showmanship, my own sense of what is rewarding and emotional for an audience? What about audience, as opposed to John Cage, who I've been surprised in learning, in reading silence and listening to him, that John Cage was more concerned with the act of composition than he was in performance. And he said they had nothing to do with each other. And I have not seen him yet, I have not understood yet, what was his relationship to audience? This is a question right now. Now as Executive Artistic Director of New York Live Arts, now being an artist who is in his rapidly approaching his 40th year as a performer, as a maker, there's this question that never goes away. Why do I do what I do? Who am I doing it for? And what about the audience? So those questions, meeting John Cage's mid-20th century sense of, I think it's a kind of an alienation, actually. An alienation that says that I am not going to pander to what you like. I'm going to do something which is driven by an intellectual set of questions.
Right.
And that's when, and we're off. Now, I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's hair-raising. It's scary, you know, watching something, as he says, get your taste out of the way.
Huh.
Get your taste out of the way. Did he really do that? I'm not sure. He says a lot of things that I wonder if he practiced. Or a favorite of theirs, and I don't know who we attribute this to, is get rid of the glue. No to transitions. No to making things, quote, develop in a way, you know.
No to a narrative arc.
No to a narrative, but you know, there's also, you know, formal arcs as well. You know, theme, variation, transition. No to all of that. Just what a thing is. This next to this next to this. That's rough going. When you're actually standing in front of it, you think, will people like it?
Right.
What is the goal? Is my goal to be winning? Is my goal to be, I'm constantly, I don't know how you feel here at the Walker, but we're still fighting that battle about audience.
I know.
You know, and what do they want? And they've made up their minds now, maybe with the help of a dumbifying media, that they know what they like. And they don't have to take vitamins anymore, cultural vitamins, to be better people.
Right.
You know, okay.
And you have long said in your work that even when you and Arnie were working together, that you rejected the modernist notion that it's almost better to be unpopular. It's better to drive your audience, part of your audience, away, to challenge them so much that half will leave. And you've said in the past that you've long tried to create the notion that a popular artist does not have to mean you're a compromised artist. Is that partly what you're grappling with here with Storytime as well?
It is, but it's odd that you should use the word compromise considering the debacle in our government right now around the idea of compromise. And those of us on the progressive left think that everyone should, in the spirit of a functioning democracy, we have to compromise. So I'm just...
No, it's very interesting. I mean, it's politically because... you know, our hope was that President Obama would, who is, I think, defines the notion of a rational player, would have a rational side to work with.
No, it's not the truth. So the artists then, for those artists, said, no, we don't have to be rational. We don't have to compromise. We put up something and give them enough time and good presenters and partners, they will come to us. I've always... for various reasons, had to look again at that question because, and now here it goes back to the question of race and identity and all of those things. How do you, Bill T. Jones, what do you make of the fact that you've been able to make a career doing this esoteric thing called modern dance? And a career means that you're able to feed yourself. And a career means that you will be able to retire someday.
Right.
And you will not end up on the state like many, many people in your family have or whatever. So you've got to play this thing, boy. You've got to play this thing. You've got to understand how to talk and walk and seduce and do everything you can so that you build up your capital.
Right.
You know? That's the other voice that you don't have usually in artistic discussions.
Right.
And I think it's specific to race and class, those things. So I've never been free in that way. I've been pretty free. I've done things which are designed to freak people out and what have you. But then as time has gone on and more is invested, I began to think about, well, what is the social contract of this artist and this society? What is the
moment that we're in this society?
This moment, and it's been going on for me, 30 years, you know?
Right.
When you stand up there, why are they letting you stand up there? They are letting you. You know, now that's a perception, right?
Sure.
And because I'm also the person who said, look, you young folks, you have as much freedom as you're willing to fight for. You have as much freedom as you're willing to shake a tail feather for. You have as much freedom as, and then fill it in. This idea of freedom is there in story time right now. There's something that Cage is getting at that I think is really amazing about the chaos of existence, the space-time continuum. Artists recognize it, and there's unity. However, it behooves the artist to have an intellectually imposed structure on such chaos. And that's what I'm exploring right now in Storytime.
And part of the device that Cage used, and as did Cunningham, was chance operations. And I know when we last spoke, you were thinking about structuring the stories using chance devices. And is that still, or that really gives up control entirely to, lack of a better term, fate?
Yeah, it's good point. And on the way over here today, as I'm thinking about talking to you, I'm also thinking about the rehearsal this afternoon, and should I start with a framing story? And should I have this very emotional, personal story here to help the audience's heart settle? And should I then, to be provocative, put this story about watching the, I think they're called Superflex film of the flooded McDonald's here at the Walker?
Right.
Should that story, which I've never done yet, fit into our showing on Wednesday to make it topical and relevant to the Walker?
All of which would upend a pure chance.
Yes, but they would be serving some other agenda.
Sure, right.
Now, if I would just say, Mr. Cage, please leave the room, thank you very much, and be free of that, I wouldn't have to have the sense of guilt that I'm somehow less courageous than he was. But Mr. Cage aside, Bill, what do you want?
Right.
Do you want the piece to, do you want some control over the emotional movement of the piece?
Right.
I've come with more questions because every day I feel differently about it.
Right.
No, we're not just spinning the wheel randomly anymore, but there are places that still are indeterminate in it.
Do you, I thought also perhaps that the structure and the looking back at Cage, that perhaps with the passing of both Cage and Cunningham, did it give you a sense of freedom to look at those devices, or did you see it as in part an homage to those figures who are no longer with us?
Yes, of course, it's an homage. I love them both for what they represent, and I don't know them as, I know them as men somewhat, but I don't really know them as men. They are ideas, and they are ideas that I cherish. They are badass artist types who really were able to do something that maybe I'm not able to do. They could thumb their nose at the world and expectations of the world. At least they did at a certain point, and they did something that was strong and all. Now, does it have legs, their idea? Is the idea of indeterminacy kind of dead in the water in a world wherein it's constantly like all about spin, all about who has the biggest pocketbook, celebrity culture. We have how many channels now? We have 100 of them. Many people can sit with their little beeper. Many people can make a John Cage, you know.
Right.
What's the traction?
Right.
And do I have? Is this a man who is angry at his father? You know, if they are my fathers, you never understood me. You never cared about me. And now I am left with this legacy. And this legacy, I am going to talk to you through your ideas. I am going to say, I'm the one still here now. You are now a collection of ideas and notions that are in places like the Walker's archives and so on. But I am up here right now in the moment. If you're asking me what this is, what it feels like with them right now, yeah, I try to, that's what it feels like. A strange kind of father-son relationship or something like that, trying to understand what did you leave me. And I spend much more time thinking of Mr. Cage than Mr. Cunningham. I find that Cage's premise gives me more room. Just the breadth of his stories, what they could be about. Whereas Merce, much as I love it, I call him my favorite choreographer. He's a choreographer's choreographer, but there was a style so strong. People in leotards, pointing their feet, gesticulating, moving in very, very inventive ways, but that's what it was. My vocabulary's never been that specific. Maybe that's a weakness in it. But that's my generation. We were a postmodern generation chewing up everything. Everything was allowed in and out. I walk through your galleries and I look at all the various approaches. What would Clement Greenberg say about what we consider
Not sure he'd be
relevant
too
now?
happy. Yeah.
Well, we wouldn't be happy at all. It's not percussive enough. The argument is not refined enough. And yet, is that a weakness of our era? Are we in a decadent phase, or is this truly now the great cloud that comes after very doctrinaire, very condensed artists? Is that the great cloud of association that takes us to the next level? I would like to think that's what's going on. So both those great men have left the stage on one level, but they have not left our minds and our hearts. And that's what story time means for me.
How did the writing of the stories unfold? I mean, because in some ways you had to look back and take apart your life into 1 minute components. It's not just about your life, but it's your perspectives. It's a whole different range of styles of expression in those 1 minute components. How did you generate the content?
Well, Philip, there's a moment where I think maybe I'll be intimate with you. I've suffered with depression the last few years. Really, it was serious. I'm in therapy.
Right.
Therapy, you go in and you
look back.
They look back. Look right now, like start pulling the threads. So why did you get angry? What was it? Could you talk to me about this situation just before you broke the glass on the table? Right?
Sure.
Now, so that's one way. One thing that had already been imposed on my way of being was this kind of hyper self-consciousness about every moment. Right now, is there a story, and me speaking to Phil Bither here in this room, which is an empty auditorium with a camera on, is there a story? And I'm even talking to you, and how would I condense it down? And to say what? That is it. Another thing, maybe more prosaic, but also profound, was being on vacation and listening in I have a beautiful little cabin out in the middle of the mesa in New Mexico, and it's a retreat. I have my tapes, and I have all this, and I listened to John Cage, and it was comforting, his voice. And then when I listened to him, I began one day to try to copy out what you say. An answer that Jasper Johns gave to a Swiss journalist, that John Cage took that answer and manipulated it. And I'm trying to just to copy out by listening, stopping, listening, just as an exercise. And then I decided, well, what does a minute story feel like for me? And I began to write them. And of course, they were all about the problem of wrestling with Cage. And then the 5 hours have gone by. And I've done maybe, I don't know how many of them. And the next day I start doing it again. That's how it started. Every day now I almost feel that something was missing when the day went by and said there was not one story in this day. As I've been working all last week, there was not one story. The only story that came to me was me walking in your galleries a couple of days ago and seeing that John Waters show and so on. But no, it is an ongoing introspection, but it can't just be introspection as you would do in therapy. It's got to result in a thing that has to be crafted. A writer came to me from your local PBS affiliate, and he said, oh, it reminded me of Derek Jarman. There's something very diaristic about it. Oh, this is not supposed to be a diary.
Right.
Because the experiences that happen to me have to have a resonance as true as John Cage reporting a Taoist story of two monks walking on the road who encounter a woman, or something, a non sequitur that you see that's full of, that you look at it later without being too poetic, and you realize it's talking about many things. That's how the stories work.
Did you find you wrote a lot of stories that you ultimately left on the editing room floor?
I have written now, I only need probably, I'm not going to do 90 minutes, I'll probably end up doing 70, but I've already written 130 of them, 130, and I'm still writing them, which is what he did. Literally,
I didn't know
for
that.
years and years he wrote stories. And I do hope to have a book published from
Fantastic.
it. Yeah.
Do you find it's changed your the notion of memory and what is reality? How do our memories relate to what the real, so-called real truth is? And what's more important, actually, the memories or what actually might have really happened? How are you grappling with those questions?
Well, that's why the stories are weird, quizzical sometimes. That's why looking at the bird feeder in the garden and describing the blue jays and so on, but while hearing in the background NPR and someone talking about dismantling of the NEA and thinking about the very big and painful experience of trying to make that work, finally do we hope. And then one of the dancers says in quoting the Southerners, "I'll be perfectly free, God damn it." Now, I've just given you the elements of a moment where I was aware of the bird feeder, listening to the radio, but my inner mind was going back to the Kennedy Center some months ago, put them together in a story. Now, that's not...
In less than a minute.
And it's got to be in a minute.
Right.
It's got to be less than a minute. That's how they're made. It's a wonderful process, one you could do for the rest of one's life, I think. It's great to have a goal right now, which is this performance that will be premiered in January.
How have you integrated movement and music and the other design elements that
the menus we call them. That was one of the wonderful things about one of the wonderful gifts that Merce gave to himself and maybe to us, this very particular vocabulary, which to my eye, and I have a pretty good eye for movement, didn't really, it went with the use of computers and all, it changed somewhat, but there was still the elements were there that you would have recognized 40 years ago, or even in those works that was done at the end of his life. That's his vocabulary.
Right.
Now mix and match and do chance procedure with them. But now you go from Bill and Arnie in a program called Body Against Body that we'll be doing, which are the early duets of Bill and Arnie, that kind of sandlot gymnastics, grappling, contact improvisation, constructivist theater, and compared with when I had dancers with more technique and understanding maybe ideas that I was gleaning from Tricia about the skeletal organization, works that were trying to be, quote, non-psychological, non-topical.
Right.
There's a certain kind of abstraction. Now, mix those all up. Make a menu that they are interchangeable, rather than something, as Merce might have, I'm going to take something from inlets from the 1960s or 70s, and now I'm going to do points in space, and now I'm going to do what have you. I think it must have been an easier job in his regard, making them all feel inevitable and one of a piece. We're wrestling with that.
So you're actually taking components from your history as a choreographer, different gestural elements and movement sequences, and actually creating a menu of which you can mix and match.
Exactly, and because that's arduous. Because there are people who come in who, what do you mean, Blauvelt Mountain? The way Arnie and I were moving together. Now this person, I came in because you liked my legs. I came in because
this is a dancer speaking.
Yeah, they don't really say it.
Right.
Yeah, and you want me to I have to master all of these styles over 30 years so that you can take out 30 seconds and do this with the material. So the pedagogy is tremendous, and Janet Wong has been battling this with me and for me. Yeah, that menu, the menu, each thing that we have to choose from should be rich and specific.
And relate to the story that's being told at that moment?
I did succumb recently. There is Tali Jackson and Eric Montez are doing a wonderful version of the first of our trilogy, Monkey Run Road. They do it beautifully. We did the ICA, we'll do it in New York.
From Body Against Body. I heard wonderful things about it.
It's a nice program. It's a nice program. I think it's more than nice. I think it's a very important program. But then I have to find a way to, I lately have been saying, okay, when they do, we have spun the dice, this will always happen on minute number 20. Okay, from now on minute number 20, Bill's story about seeing Eric's forearm with a tattoo on, rehearsing Monkey Run Road should always accompany that minute. I made that decision.
But you literally use dice to decide
well,
when
not
that,
dice.
or
We used
some
random.com.
Yeah, right.
That's what it was.
Which is really random there,
Right,
or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some where the story about my father falls, a dream about my father and I being home that I had 20 years after his death, or where things about the place I'm in, like I told you today.
Right. Yeah.
Is it interesting, that story that the only story I've written since being here about the flooded McDonald's,
Right.
you know?
That piece, yeah.
Is that's site specific. That's about you. That's about people who will come and see a work in progress. And why do I think that's important? Well, I have a feeling that it will make it more resonant with you.
Right.
Because my concern with this way of working is that, bless his heart, but John was not ultimately, I don't know what he ultimately wanted to do. I think he was a very emotional man, but did he really want to engage people emotionally? He said he did not want to, you know? Although I do find I get engaged when I listen to him read.
Right.
But it's very easy for things to, let's face it, I love Merce, but Merce, there are huge stretches of where the attention wanders.
Right.
You know? Can I afford that, since my menu is so much richer, and not richer in the sense there's so many more variations, and it is so theatrical in places.
Right.
Can I afford for people to just sort of, oh, it doesn't really matter what I'm looking at?
But emotion has always been important to your work. It's one of the things you've marked as separating you from your predecessor, from the modernists or the artists of the 50s and 60s who were stripping everything back. And so
distrusting, psychologically motivated, or works that
or
were
was
designed,
viewed sometimes as manipulative.
Yeah.
But you've
things
said
that wanted an effect, wanted a result, you know.
right. And
How
so
to want anything? How is it all right to want something from
in terms
people?
of making an audience feel
Yes,
something.
to
at a
want
certain
them to feel something.
Right.
Is that cheesy? It's been the hallmark of art for a long time.
Right.
The ancient Greeks had a term for it called catharsis, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
you go to the theater because you're supposed to have an emotional experience, but
Right.
somewhere in the post-Jungian Freudian world, I don't know when it happened, maybe it was, I don't know. Well, that's another question.
Yeah.
But I'm losing it.
But it seems like that's something you have long grappled with, that struggle between formalism and a sort of kind of emotional connection to an audience, and something that I think has made your work so profound, because in some ways that struggle is like a cauldron. It sort of bakes it.
So, Philip, you set up a forum for me to say a lot of half-baked things, but there's two responses. One, don't let me forget Broadway. But two, I thought that is what black people did in America. You know, when you...
Was the society's kind of ability to...
somebody raises their voice and say, oh, I don't feel good this morning.
Right.
Because something has happened to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so angry I could kill you. You know, you're gonna in a world that it has to be metaphorical. It has to be, and now I don't know who we're talking about, because I know what level of society, maybe everybody does that, but black people were always testifying.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the form of the black church was. You stand up in your community. You've heard me say this, and you testify. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you I've got cancer.
Right.
And I'm feeling down. And the congregation says, I hear you. Preach, brother, preach.
Right.
You know, and then you have the whole attention of the community. And then somebody else stands up and they testify. It was always direct and personal. The one speaking to the community, not alienated from the community. Now, alienation is, I think, the lifeblood of modernism. You've got to have an alienated, distant stance from the world. I mean, the surrealists, they wanted to shock the middle classes, right? You know, artists had some sort of superior knowledge, and they had to go through all sorts of indignities to make that part of the discourse. I don't know, what were they doing it for? Yeah. I look at people like Jasper Johns, whose work I love, and I think some of those guys, I see it in Cindy Sherman. I see these people are angry as hell. They're really angry. And a lot of the work, even if it's obtuse or if it's cynical or the critique quote.
Right.
Artists critiquing the world. They're really angry. They want to make a better world. Is that why they're talking about the subjugation of women, or they're talking about the chicanery or mendacity of the popular media? Is that why that's why they're doing it? Or they just want to say, I want you to know I'm smarter than you are. I can see how things work. You know, is it about social change? The modernist project? Was Picasso exploring planar geometry in his paintings and taking apart the face because it's good for us to look closer, right?
What do you think?
Well, I don't think they thought about it.
Right.
Some of us had to think about it because we had voices that people before us had not had voices. And we were also speaking, and we weren't sure that anyone really, first of all, could even understand our voices or even gave a damn. So you had to assert your voice, and it had to have a moral authority, right? Problematic, isn't it? Because then it's art as propaganda. And now we're chasing our tail here.
Right.
Now going back to this idea of emotionalism, right? When I bring my ideas to the commercial stage,
which is something
about non-narrative or non-linear thinking,
right?
You know, because they're big on storytelling there. They got to have a protagonist. He's got to have a desire, and the whole of the show has got to be about him getting his desire.
Yeah.
Things can't just exist as they do for John Cage, which is why I love him.
As something in and of itself. Yes. Because I should preface this is that since we last really had you here 5-6 years ago, you've had success on Broadway in the commercial theater world with Fela, choreographing Spring Awakening. You're working on a new Broadway show. And I was so interested in what that world, what's working in that world, which you've done so successfully, what it's brought to your practice as a postmodern choreographer, if anything.
I wish.
And what are the sort of challenges that you've faced in not having complete control over the ultimate project?
Right. Well, I'm not sure if I've been able to integrate what I've learned in one in the other. I was about to say that when I thought that what was innovative in Fela was the fact that it did not put you through those fake scenes of a person's inner life and people singing, and so you're just going to see the man, and you're going to have these juxtapositions between what's on the wall and what's happening and all of that. Many people really enjoyed it, and the music is music, and that's what rock music does. Is it anti-intellectual, or is it pre-intellectual? I say you hear Fela's music in your hips,
right?
You know, so yeah, let's get up. The ritual of going to a rock concert is a theatrical one. Is it? Is theater primarily an intellectual activity? Or is theater something about more animal, more about a communion? What we know, what is a rock concert about? You know, you can't even understand what the people are even saying most of the time, but there's a feeling. I thought, okay, well, I will put that in quotations. We're quoting a rock show, which is already a quote of a theatrical form. And then smart people will know that, in fact, we're talking about the form. I am basically a formalist. We're talking about the form of his music, the form of his life, and we put it into another context, and therefore something began. We ask questions about it, and there's the engagement I get when I walk through your galleries or I sit in certain performances. I don't know what the hell is going on, but if I sit there long enough and I relax, associations begin to come up. That's how we were taught to look at art.
Right.
That world does not trust that. People need to know what's going on.
I thought there was a moment at Northrop, probably 10 years ago, when we presented, we set out early, I think, and we did a post-performance discussion. And I've repeated this many times in different settings because it struck such a chord with me. And someone raised their hand from the audience, this huge auditorium, you know, so we could barely do a Q&A there, but you asked, and they said, could you tell me what that moment when the dancers were moving in this way and they were this, and they clearly, the person did not trust their own perspective on what it might be, and you said, you tell me. And that person came up with the most beautiful poetic, like, I saw birds and I saw this and that. And you said, you're absolutely right. And it gave a power to that spectator and confidence, I think, in their own ability to create meaning out of abstraction.
And haven't we been saying that since day one in the wake of the first and second great waves of modernism? That a lot of looking at art is actually engaging in a process of recreation, in which you are a participant. Oh, how liberating, how socialist. You mean that I am a little non-professional here? I can actually
be part of the creation?
Yeah, and it could be valid.
Right.
Well, yeah, it can be. It can be.
Are you disappointed ever? I am occasionally, I must say, that notion has not stuck more with the general public. That when you go to the commercial theater world, that the producers who are savvy and seen a lot and things don't trust that an audience can take that leap. In some ways.
Am I disappointed? Well, I think they know something about reality. You asked me a moment ago about reality.
Right.
And being middle-aged, reality is literally hitting you in the face daily. The majority of people are very are lazy, and this is a terrible way to put it. They're tired, and particularly when they put down $100 to go to the theater.
Worked all day.
They want, do me.
Right.
They say, do me. Right.
Right.
Is this in the wake of television? I don't know. Reality is, what are you, artists, Bill T. Jones, what are you going to do with that reality? So I can push them around and force them, but do you want to make money? Why are you in this theater? Why are you in this form? You should be at the Walker Arts Center or at Brooklyn Academy of Music if you think you want them to do this kind of work and you want them to get excited about the work they do in the theater. Because most of them, they say they're here because they want an experience that's going to be like a amusement park. They want that. They're telling you they want that. What are you going to do? Or are you so smart, you're going to seduce them into another way of thinking?
Use a subversive approach.
Yeah, which is where I am arrogant enough to think I'm still trying to do. I was told by my producers on the new piece I'm doing right now, they appreciate it fairly. They said, there's a good transitional work for you. Now,
red lights going up.
Yeah. Now that was a good transitional work. Fela. Now you're going to get serious, and you're going to understand really how to make a musical now. You know? Oh, okay. How to do it right. And I want to be a good student. Fela is very difficult. Did not recoup his money. You know? It's touring now. Maybe it will.
Yeah.
That was a brave thing that producer did, Steve Handel. Bless him. He really wanted to make a work of art, something that no one had ever seen on Broadway. And I don't think there's ever been anything like that on Broadway. But did that help it? What's still running now? I don't need to name my competition, but other musicals that are, everyone, even the critics were saying, oh, it's so run-of-the-mill. But the public is coming again and again and again. Why do commercial theater? Why are you there? Why don't you go to BAM? Why don't you come to the Walker Arts Center and just be satisfied? So you ask me what I've learned. This is what I'm learning about myself. The ambitious son of a bitch that I am, and this one that actually thinks he's smart enough that maybe he could have it both ways. Stay tuned. Let's see how it flies.
You've also maintained at one of the toughest times in recent years a working dance company that that is not in America right now is not an easy thing, and it requires a substantial amount of resources. Yeah. And you, in some ways, it seems like you've balanced these two worlds: your work in the commercial theater and you're artistically directing and maintaining an important company in America. Are you ever tempted to just let that go or move into, I mean, because you're juggling a lot in many ways.
I should pay you today, Philip. Yeah, well, no, it's real. It's very real. And my companion, Bjorn Ameland, we looked at each other now about 10 years ago and said, look, let's give this company thing 3 more years and see. Because I could not walk away from the child that Arnie Zane and I had.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
And 3 years was enough just to see that there was a way to get a finger hold, and maybe some good breaks, some breaks. The choices of works, the controversy. What keeps you in the eye? What keeps people, some good friends, saying, "Okay, come try again"? What do? You brazen it out on one level. There are times when I am demoralized and I say, if I had a way of feeding myself and feeding him and us becoming old men and having the life that we like, I don't need to strive anymore to prove to someone that I have something that they should be listening to. I think of that sometime. Don't act on it, of course. And how did I get excited about story time how did that happen? Well, I thought, well, gosh, you got this Broadway thing going. Maybe that could take care of your pocketbook over here. And then now you could just like give yourself with joyfully participate in this other more esoteric world over here.
Yeah.
And now, I think I've been able to survive because there are just enough people who believe in that which makes me maybe a little different. Maybe it's the social change angle. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the fact that I actually make things sometimes that are not so pure, that I really take a chance and try to talk to various communities. I took a real chance with the Fondly Do We Hope. I set out to make a popular spectacle. That would be something that a little girl...
The work on Abraham Lincoln.
The work on Abraham Lincoln. We were at Gamage Auditorium in Tempe, and a black woman and her 8-year-old daughter, the woman said, "I thank you, sir. I brought her here tonight, and you know what? She got it." She got it. Now, could you talk to her about these things? I was so moved by that, As you know, many people didn't think it worked, but it worked. And that little 8-year-old girl was sort of thinking about history and about form and about the story and when it wasn't a story. And why were they sometimes doing one thing and another thing was being sung about? That was so cool, that work was supposed to be trying to walk the high art and the popular art line around a topic that is supposed to be about a big discourse. That's what I wanted it to be. Incidentally, that's what I also wanted Still Here to be, and Uncle Tom's Cabin to be. That's why I think that some people said, there's just enough in this guy that when I bring an uninitiated person to see modern dance, they oftentimes say, I had never seen dance before, but I sort of like that.
Right.
I don't know if you remember, you mentioned, we set out early, but what my niece said to me, I thought you were referring just a moment ago to a section in the last section, which I believe is called Voiceland, toward the end. Pteris Vas, the Estonian composer,
fantastic
A Distant
music.
Light, but very heart in its life. Amir Kalam said, I hate that music. It's just too, it's like, but I want it to ride on emotion, right? But at the end of it, there is a tight group of people moving across on a diagonal.
That was, I think, the section.
That's the moment. And I told them, I want you to dance as if you're in a club. Now show me what you do. And they got loose, but we got to move on this line. And you could do anything you want. And suddenly they were moving in a way we hadn't seen them move all evening. And it was the music, of course, and my niece who said, Uncle Bill, I have to tell you, for years, I don't know what you're doing. It just seems like noise to me. But that I liked, That meant something to me, right? That meant something to me. What is story time going to be when they get there? Is it going to be still a piece that a board member can bring his 16-year-old to, as people brought, who was it, Mick Jagger's son? Mick Jagger brought his son to see Fela, and the son became a Fela fan and so on like that. Many, many people have told me that. The kids brought the parents brought the kids, and they were turned on by it, Who is this guy? We like his work. I don't know how unlike it is anything I've done. Story time, me sitting in a chair, intoning 70 stories nonstop, taxing your ability to put together the meaning of this. Is that going backwards? That was supposed to be the respite I was given by having this populist platform over here called Broadway, so that I could do something ferocious over here. I don't know, do I have the courage to really be ferocious? No, I'm still not trying. I don't want to run anybody out of the theater. I don't want to. I don't want to.
But your presence is so powerful on stage. And when I was in Tempe seeing the earlier 6 months ago, the individual stories have their own compelling nature. You're wanting to know what the next one's going to be. So, do you need a little? You even said that to me. I thought it was brilliant. You said, well, maybe some of them should be one word. Yes,
right. Now, that one word might be a little too precious, bird.
Right,
What would be wrong?
yeah.
However, there's one that I wrote since then. Maybe it was that night. It was, the saying goes, we live and learn. Gus Jones, my father, used to say, we live and learn, we die and forget it all. That's a story. And it's a lot of space.
Right.
If that's
Give some
to sit in a
breathing
minute,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we're working on that. But I don't know, Philip, that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah.
That's what makes me, I still have the credibility that comes with being neurotic and obsessed, which I think is what probably a job description for many artists.
Presenters occasionally too.
Oh, hey, that's why we hang out together, right?
No, it's but I would imagine you've talked about as you go on to each new work, it becomes a struggle practically to the death. I mean, like you have to grapple with these issues.
Or leave.
Right.
Just have the courage to leave it, Bill. And then I've been doing it since I was 19. It's been the way I understood myself, what it meant to be a black man, what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be in love, what it meant to lose one you love, what it meant to actually dare believe in justice, dare believe in beauty. Walking through the art some years, leaving a show called, this is a story, leaving a show called Winter Paintings by Pat Steer. I was recalling some years ago when then curator Richard Flood was walking us through the galleries, and we came upon a Joan Mitchell painting that was so striking that I said, what has taken so long for her to be accepted? And he said, Riley, Bill, it's the problem of beauty. Recently, 2 young artists from Columbia came to dinner, and I asked Dash, I said, Dash told me that right now everybody is conceptual. Dash said, it's just a way of thinking. Okay, what is that story, Conceptual art, conceptual thinking, beauty, the past, the present. And where am I? I'm a kind of a spectator looking and thinking about it.
Do you this is a slightly different question, but aside from your work on the stage and your work leading a company, you're also one of the few figures who I think we can rightfully say coming out of the contemporary arts world who's also, for lack of a better term, a public intellectual. You're a spokesperson in some ways for a culture, and what kind of, do you feel that response? A way of being, a way of being an artist, and being present around what's going on in our society. Does that feel like a burden, a responsibility, or something that you have enjoyed embracing?
I have to have a sense of humor about it. I have to wear it lightly because I am not a theoretician. I have no degrees in social policy or what have you. I have a gut feeling, and I have a poetic turn of mind, which means the ability to make associations, where associations are maybe not normally there.
Have you found moments, I think of figures like Bob Dylan or, I don't know, others, who have, as soon as that mantle of a leading political voice is put on them, they want to run fleeing from it. Have you found times where political causes or political, movements have wanted you, and you felt, that
black
tension?
Art? What, black dances?
That too, or so.
I ran away from that one.
Social
for a long
causes,
time.
black.
I mean, being a gay artist,
right?
Being an HIV positive, an artist who makes pieces about AIDS.
Yeah,
I've always run away from that. Run away from them. I always pushed them away and said, let's put this in the context of poetry. No, AIDS is a horrible thing, but it is not the first time, or will it be the last time, when the imperatives of plague or disease has shaped our experience. And well, now let's talk about what we're so anxious about. We're anxious about loss. We're anxious about not only could it happen to you, but it could happen to me. Now let's talk about that. Now I'm comfortable there, because artists sing about life and death.
Right.
And I say, sing about them. Now, singing is something you have to do. Fannie Lou Hamer says that she encouraged people to sing in those early days of the civil rights struggle because she says it's harder for people to kill you when you're singing. So when the state troopers surrounded the church,
Sure.
they'd start singing. Heads were still cracked, but the fact is, it makes the brute even stop. Because suddenly you've changed the chemistry. That's what it is, changing the chemistry. So the singing, I'm trying to, as I go, what is my response to the chicanery and stupidity right now in Washington? Did you see that in the Kennedy Center? Did you see the Kennedy Center?
Yes.
Yeah. You're one of those people who's been really circumspect about it. You've not said anything about it.
Well,
I think it's a big moment for this world.
It's huge. In fact, that was going to be.
And I can't even answer that, except that the part that they cut out was after my segment.
Right.
You know, which started with Edward Albee actually saying, "You don't remember that? They cut that out." He said, "Well, we all know that the best playwrights are Democrats, and the audience have got to laugh, right?" And he said, "Oh, no, I knew of a Republican. Does anybody know what happened to him?" Big laugh. They cut it out. Later, when it's over and all the applause are happening, and I've stood up and sat down and they're still applauding, and I do this.
Yeah.
And then I do this, right? This is what they cut out. And I did it to the room. And I turned to President Obama and I said, this. Now, they cut that out. Now,
see, I saw that section online. And
oh, did you?
They kept, well, it was on your site. And
really?
You kept it on.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I didn't realize that.
That's called singing, right? That is a dancer's understanding of gesture in the moment. You know, what did it mean? You know, what's my political position? From a very important woman, her husband's probably one of the most important men in the country right now, who is a friend of ours. She is, he is not. She wrote me that night and said, friends of mine were in attendance tonight, and they saw you give the Black Power salute to the president to encourage him, right? I'm sorry we even have to ask, but it was a subject of some consideration tonight. Nobody's come up to me and said, what did it mean? You know, I saw Mr. Obama's face, I saw Michelle's, I saw Oprah's face, I saw them all doing that. What is he saying? Now, we know what he's saying, don't we? You know?
Right.
We know what he's saying. But at that moment, I was singing it.
Right.
I was singing it. So is that what makes me engaging? No, I thought coming from your heart, I think you and my politics are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, sir. Even if you're going to be a one-term president, this is how we do it.
Could you get any read of how he took that gesture? And
later on, as we had cocktails backstage, he put his arm around me and said, "It's complicated." You know, he is a cool dude.
Right.
You know, I have great respect for him. He can't afford to be me.
Right.
He cannot afford to have his heart in his sleeve, I think. And everybody, and I think it's disingenuous for the left to do that. You should have come in and just fallen on your sword for us, you know?
Right. Meaning what they're saying to him.
Now.
Yeah, right.
You should have just been like tougher.
Right.
Never mind, you came into like a limping fucking country. Excuse me.
No.
And you're a black man.
Right.
So we expect you to be over the top, emotional, and so on. And you're the smartest guy in the room, and we all know you're the smartest guy in the room. We need you to be cool. We need you to be compromising. We need you to be working angles. Do I wish you were a bit more of a Baptist preacher? Yes, I do. Do I wish he would get what we used to call it, I'm going to get colored on your ass. You know, it means to get colored, as before, or I'm going to get black on your ass, you know. Do we want him to? Yeah, I would like that. But that's why he's where he is and I'm where I am now. So is this the Bill T. Jones you're talking about who has, quote, taken on social issues? Right. It's not precise.
Yeah.
It's not even efficient, you know? It's often indulgent, a feeling state, you know? Because,
so you mean it's not planned or necessarily? It comes, or when you say not efficient or not.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Strategic.
It's not strategic.
Yeah.
That's what's not strategic.
Right.
And strategy is one thing I'm trying to understand as a director of this, one of the few companies still standing.
Right.
Yeah. And this new New York Live Arts.
Right.
I'm now supposed to be representing a community of people.
Right.
You know, he's all about himself, right? Yes, the work has been personal. That's where its point of view was.
That's what an artist does.
Yes, but not this one, because you are obviously, you're so famous and all right now because you're just a megalomaniac. And you can't be like the rest of us without egos who are not about ourselves. That's some of the BS that I get right now in trying to take on this mantle. I'm here to serve the same thing we're all here for.
Right.
You know,
because you have merged with Dance Theater Workshop.
Yes.
Your company has created a new entity.
blending, quote, the DNA of the two organizations.
Right.
That's what I told my board when they said, Bill, you know this is going to be an adjustment, if not a setback, for your brand. We've been building this over the years. For you to do this, you're going to have to take a step back, and you're going to put a lot of your, half of my board has gone to the Dance Theater Workshop board. You know, we had a momentum going, but I'm saying, they say, you know, this could really sink you, you know. You go from $3.2 million a year to now 5.5, right? Oh, but we are greater than the sum of our parts. So I said, wait a minute, first and foremost, I have such respect for that place where Arnie Zane and I did some of our most important work, that it would be an honor for me to blend not only competencies, which is what we have done, but to blend the DNA. That would be, I'm concerned with legacy right now. That would be a worthwhile way. If I have another 10 years of a high-level performance, I'm willing to give it to this venture.
And what kind of things have you discovered, or what kinds of responsibilities come with blending the DNA of a place like what used to be called Dance Theater Workshop and the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company?
Being clear about what we're talking about when we say progressive movement practice. Helping them and helping me understand what makes us in the same world and where are its boundaries. Who is not in the fold?
Right.
Now you're a curator.
Right.
I'm sure you like a lot of things, but only certain things you actually put on stage.
I'm a curator at a particular institution.
In a great institution, and that way they give
but
you
that has a pretty clear mission.
Clear mission. So defining that mission.
Right.
Carl and I talk a lot about that. Why this and not that? For instance, has there not been any groundbreaking works made with Horton technique? You know, why isn't Horton technique ever done here? And what about classical ballet? You know, has there been anything of groundbreaking and important in classical ballet? Why doesn't it happen here? You know?
Would you say that the downtown dance world of the 21st century owes its greatest allegiance to the Judson artists? Is that?
Oh God, still?
I mean, it's, in some ways, I wonder when you raise these questions about ballet, Horst, you know.
Well, you put it in very well. Thank you. I wish Carla would say that back to me. Well, Bill, it's because our point of focus in the past is Judson. And we are the descendants of Judson. Oh, well then, say that to me then. Nobody said that, and I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I think now, 2012, is where I'm thinking, what do we have to say about the continuity of what we call modern dance or contemporary performance movement? Charlie Reinhardt was so upset years ago when Arthur Aviles wrote in his bio that he was a student of the postmodern pioneer Eileen Pasloff. And Charlie said, what is this? Postmodern, you know? Modern is barely 70 years old, 100 years old. Why are you already branching off? What's wrong with modern? Why can't you just be a part of modern? His point is well taken.
Right.
Why did we feel like we needed to break like that?
Right.
Carl and I are talking about that. We're talking about replay, which is that used to be called Season of Returns.
Yeah.
Now, it could be things like Richard Move had a big success with his latest Martha Graham piece, and John Kelly is coming back with Find My Way Home, a legendary work.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, what about that work that Paul Taylor did back in the 60s that was so minimal that the writer at the Times wrote the name of the work, left 3 columns blank.
And people don't even remember that about
Maybe
Taylor,
we should be doing that.
Right.
Maybe we should really be expanding so is it about Judson Church, or is it about an attitude, a relationship to the status quo? What about works that were so decried, you know, at their time? Can we find the budget and the wherewithal to get those works, and let's look at them. Let's have the downtown world, whoever our audience is, come and really reconsider what our boundaries and our prejudices are, what our assumptions are.
It puts the institution a bit more in a realm of a little bit like what a museum does, in the sense of
Bingo.
thinking. The dance has not had a history that it's been able to look back at very easily.
And why? There have been a lot of smart people who have come through there.
Right.
Why don't we get the same kind of space in the discourse that the visual arts do? Because why? Because I said, as I told Carla today, I shocked Kiki Smith, my friend, when I said to her, "Oh, I've decided that I am in an esoteric branch of the entertainment industry." You know, what? What? Yeah, but I almost mean it.
Right,
you know.
right.
And the entertainment industry is not serious, right?
Right.
You know, it's not. You know, but I think we've proven that we're serious. Ask Bruce Nauman about his work with Meredith Monk.
Right.
How she
Sure.
inspired him. You know, his crazy clown walks and all that
Right.
stuff came
Yeah.
from works he did with her. But you got to really look at the footnotes to
Right.
understand what
Yeah.
it's been done. So this is something else. This is, and I keep saying to Carla, two things. New York Live Arts is about what my tenure would like to be about is expanding the cultural footprint. What does that mean?
For
Expand-
dance. Or for
We don't even use dance in the title.
I know.
Right?
It's interesting. Yeah.
Progressive movement practice. Movement-based art practice. That's the word we're using. The young are telling me that they don't make those distinctions.
Right.
And in some ways, dance runs the risk of being like mime in many people's minds.
Or even jazz.
Ooh, it was low. It was low.
No, only
no,
because,
it's very true though. Very
you know?
true. And jazz is close to my heart, but you know, most people think that jazz is something to do with Lincoln Center. It's good for you.
Right.
It's pedigreed, but no, I'm not interested.
I asked this question to all the jazz artists who come through. I'm like, do you consider yourself a jazz? Is jazz a good term or not for you? Most say I would prefer. I respect the history and I pull from it all the time, but I don't want to be known as a jazz artist.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you.
But I mean, and some of it is labels. But dance has been now defined in some ways in the greater general public's mind as something that they're not interested in.
Yeah, it's like vitamins.
Right.
Taking your vitamins. Yeah, and
It's interesting.
yeah. No, that is what, you know, when we were, I know from some years back, we were doing the table project out in the lobby here. And it was a Saturday morning, and we're like rehearsing this, and we're, you know, and
We had hundreds of
I looked at the notes later,
Right.
and I saw some super cool young dudes who came in who wrote, "I can live without modern dance," you know, in the ledger here, right?
Yeah.
That's what they felt. Well, okay, maybe you can, but then we inside of it, are we still understanding how to participate in the culture?
Right.
Or are we still going to hunker down or pull back? Because ultimately, we were only interested in performing for each other anyways, right? Which is nice, you know, which is nice.
Right.
I don't know if all ideas can survive in the open air.
Yeah.
Now here, Carla and I have been discussing, she said, no, I do not accept, and I was when it said, some people believe that certain arts should be in a preserved domain. You need a preserved domain, right?
An R&D center.
Right,
yeah.
R&D. And she said, no, that's infantilizing, and it's making, she said, our artists are interested in the world. Well, then what's going on then? We need better public relations. Why don't we have the critical mass of attention given to intellectual attention given to this world?
Right.
Why don't we? That's one of the things we're trying to explore there. It's only 184 seats.
Right.
So it's not about masses of people getting there, but the weight of it, the cultural weight of it, the intellectual weight, with the help of the internet, with the help of partners like you,
Right.
partners, there should be a major weight given to what happens in contemporary performance movement practice.
Right.
I probably used 3 or 4 ways of describing it, which says a lot about where we're at right now and trying to understand what this thing is.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Let me finish with, well, I guess a question in general about, we did touch on it before, but You know, we have a moment with President Obama, first African American president. I think statistics show us that younger generations have exhibited so much more openness and just not even unquestioning acceptance of gay and lesbian folks in our community. These are good things, but we seem to be in a culture at a time of great darkness, of great pessimism. You just made a work on Abraham Lincoln that raised the question of, you know, this is a leader who was at a time when the country was at war with itself. We seem to be, as a people, at war with ourselves.
I call it an undeclared civil war.
Right.
Yes.
How are you now, in the end of 2011, feeling about the future of this land and the future for artists? And do you feel there's a sense of optimism, or do you share the sense of oncoming sort of dark ages that it feels like we may be entering into?
Well, indulge me. I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. I shall not be removed. Now, that's called singing. You asked me a very complicated question. All I can do is sing. And what is the song singing? This is a song slaves sang, right? And what do they sing? What does the song say? That's the only answer I can give you. Do I have a position, a platform? Right? As Mr. Obama's trying to develop his to go forward, you know, it's about the way we move. It's about the things that we do. I want people to understand what I'm tasting, why I think that story time is a tasty, important exercise about mind and heart and memory and hope. Eyes. I got to show it. I need partners to do that. That's one answer I have. I am traumatized around things. I do racial looking. I have the hurt of an outsider. I don't know if I'll ever be over it, you know. I do believe, as people say, oh, the young, I've already crossed into the promised land. And how did it work in the Old Testament? That those persons there were certain people who were not allowed to go to the promised land. They had to die. Not because they were bad people, because they were contaminated. The promised land was going to be for the doers. New York Live Arts, let's talk really about a place where it's about the participation in the world of ideas. And what do we really mean about progressive? I'm an architect of it. I am not the sole guide, you know? I'm waiting for the young genius to come along and tell me what the next big thing is and the relevance of this art form that so many of us are giving our lives to. I'm waiting, because I'm in a middle-aged man's fight right now. I'm fighting gravity on every level, right? Right. And I'm trying to be canny. But I know it's not old man's work. It's a young man's work. But the old man have got to put the shoulders so the young step on it. That's my kind of overly poetic way of answering your question. But don't forget, that's all I can say. You have to sing it. You have to sing it. Stand up and sing it, you know? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This. You go, you know?
It's great. Thank you, Bill T. Jones. I so appreciate you being with us.
Yes, it's a great pleasure being here, Bill. Thank you.